podcast episode number 36. And this is your host, Nick Murray. Today we are doing the third in a series of Downwind podcasts. And we are joined by Barry and Rod of the Paddle Channel. So we did first South Africa with Oscar Chalupski. Then we went out to Bellingham and met there with Reavers Dustin and discovered downwinding in Bellingham Bay. Now we're moving across the U.S. to the other coastline in North Carolina with Barry and Rod, who started the Paddle Channel a couple years ago. You can find them on Instagram and YouTube at the Paddle Channel, and really doing an amazing job there, creating videos on their journey into Surfski. So they both started in SUP, moved into outrigger paddling, and now for about the last year and a half or so have been getting into the Surfski and documenting their journey in full transparency on their channel. So it's a great resource, pretty unique content, definitely worth checking out. As far as the downwind run, so they are in Carolina Beach, which is just a bit south of Wrightsville. Many of you may know about the Carolina Cup, which is one of the biggest races in the U.S. Takes place out of and is, I think, primarily sponsored by the Wrightsville Paddle Club, which is about 45 minutes to an hour north of Carolina Beach. But it's all beautiful coastline in North Carolina, lots of warm water most of the year, and in the summer, prevailing winds that really line up right around the coastline. So I think you'll really enjoy this podcast. Hopefully you learn a bit and maybe some point get a chance to get out there and check it out. So without further ado, let me kick this off. All right, Rod and Barry, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys for agreeing to join me here and talk about the Paddle Channel and the paddling scene in North Carolina, downwind runs. Excited to cover it all. I haven't been there. I'll say the closest I've been is Charleston. So I have paddled Charleston a number of times. Not any real downwinds. I've done a lot of out and back activity, but that's as close as I've gotten. It's definitely on my list. And I'm sure after this discussion, I'll be making some plans to get out there. But I thought we could start today's discussion just with some background. So probably a lot of the audience hopefully has seen some of the great videos you guys have done on the Paddle Channel. If you haven't seen that, it's an awesome resource. I think it's unique content. It kind of very honest and transparent, and it kind of gives a good feel for your journey into paddling from starting with stand up into outrigger and into surfski. So I've really enjoyed watching it. I think it's a great resource for paddlers. It's better, different than all of us want to document our downwinds. And so there's thousands of videos out there now of the nose of the boat going into the waves. And, unless you're a paddler, it's hard to get a good feel for those videos. The camera's flat and everything. And, we're so excited to share them with our friends, and then non-paddler friends kind of look at them and they're kind of like, okay,
Right.
Looks cool. But what you guys are doing with narrating and really talking the listener through what's going on, I think is really powerful. So that is great stuff. So I'm excited to have you on, and let's just start. Let's a little bit of your background, sort of how you got into paddling, what kind of paddling you started with, where you're at now, and we'll go from there.
Barry, I'll let you go ahead.
Oh, okay. Grew up surfing, playing soccer, went in the Marine Corps, met my wife here in Wilmington. So this is home. I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else in my life. My daughter, Anna, was 12 at the time, and she was at a surf camp at Carolina Beach, and the waves were flat the whole week. And I was kind of like, man, because I wanted her to get hooked on surfing, right? And she came home one day stoked because they had put all the kids on stand-up paddle boards. So that was 9 years ago. And so I started doing stand-up paddleboard races to encourage her. And it was something we could do together. and she was quite successful, and at least in our area. Now she's 21 and she knows everything, and she doesn't care about paddling right now. But so after about doing stand up for about 3 years, I really got into outrigger. And the reason I got into outrigger canoe was because I was trying to downwind on a stand up, and I wasn't having a whole lot of fun doing that. I was sort of, it was probably just me. But anyway, I got on an OC2 with a buddy who knows how to downwind. And that started the downwind addiction for me. I got an OC1 very quickly, and that has been a blast. And just, I guess, what is it, Rod, a year and a half ago, we started figuring out, trying to learn
almost 2
Surfski.
years. Yeah, almost 2 years now. But,
So
but a year and a half ago, we really started concentrating on the Surfski.
Right. So I still have an OC1, but very much into Surfski right now. I mean, that's what I do 90% of the time now is paddle Surfski. And that first year was pretty brutal. You know, it's pretty common. I found a Surfski for a great price.
But it wasn't a V8, was it?
No, it was a first generation V10. And after I had bought it, I found out that the reason he sold it is because he couldn't paddle it in the ocean.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, no exaggeration, I would go and paddle and fall out of the thing 10, 11 times every paddle session. Flat
Sure.
water, and then you take me to the inlet or the ocean, and just exponential falling. But I finally started figuring it out, and it's I just sold it. I have a Vega Surfski now, and downwinding in a Surfski is opening up the ability to link bumps even more than an OC1.
Interesting.
And downwinding is where it's at. But I don't know, that's my story there in about 90 seconds.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Let me ask you something, Barry. You said that downwinding the Surfski is opening up downwinding in general. Do you think it makes you a better OC1 paddler?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Oh yeah. Because I get in the OC1 now, and it's like the balance is so hard in a Surfski. When you get back in the OC1, you know, it's just your confidence is very high. You know, I'm not able to connect quite as many bumps in the OC1, you know, simply because the AMA is a little bit of a hindrance.
Mm-hmm.
But the Surfski, it's the more I figure out leg drive, the more I figure out the balance and when to sprint and when to relax. It's amazing how you started to figure out, hey, I can reach that bump, or nope, can't reach that, just relax. Or you get your speed up and then you see a gate and you go, and the Surfski can go.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're still so early into it. I mean, a year and a half is nothing. So you're going to just go. It's just going to go on and on.
That's what everybody keeps telling me. Yeah.
That's an exciting thing. I mean, I don't know. The neat thing is, like, I don't know how old you are. I know I'm almost 47, and my son asked me the other day, he said, you know, Dad, when do you think you're going to slow down and not continue to improve, you know? And I'm like, hey, it's a good question, but I feel confident that, you know, if fitness holds strong enough, if skill keeps going and going, then 60 maybe. Somewhere in there.
You know, you talk to Greg Green. Greg's 65.
Yeah.
And
dude,
he is inspiring. And he came and he paddled with us. We did 5 or 6 downwind runs, had a blast. And that guy, I mean, he's right there.
Yeah.
I'm like, good. I turned around and I'm like, dude, I smoked him. And I'm like, nope, he's right there.
Right there.
I'm like, wow. And he told me and Rod, he goes, I'm still getting better. And I'm like, that, I love hearing that, because that's how I want to be. That's how we all want to be.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, that's killer. So he's our inspiration, you know. He's still getting better. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Rod, your turn, buddy.
Yeah, I guess I started paddling stand up kind of accidentally. Actually, my wife, for my birthday, she we weren't living in the area. We weren't living in the Wilmington area. We were living several hours inland, and lived on a lake, a little tiny lake, several hours inland. And Susan bought me a session with Jared Covington over at Wrightsville Sup. Got us out on the paddle boards. It was the first time I'd ever been on a paddle board. I think it was 2012. And I was like, that's pretty cool. That's something. So, you know, the next weekend I had purchased a paddle board, but 1 week later I had one and was taking it out on the lake. And what had happened, I had been doing triathlon for like 10 or 12 years, and everything was starting to ache. You know, I was getting old, and the knees hurt and the back hurt and the shoulders hurt, but especially the knees hurt. And I thought, well, this is cool. I can paddle this and my knees don't hurt, and I'm getting a great workout. I'm on the water, you know, and my favorite part of the triathlon was being on the water anyway, you know, being in the water anyway.
Yeah.
So I thought this, and then one day I heard about this thing down in Carolina at the Carolina Cup down at Wrightsville Beach. And it was kind of blew my mind, because I was like, you can race these things? I had no idea anybody was racing paddle boards. So that kind of, you know, flipped back over to my triathlon training. I was like, well, this is perfect. If I can train and race on this thing, this is going to be great. And so, you know, I did, and my fitness got to be pretty good. And then I came down to do Carolina Cup, and there were all these waves and bumps, and, you know, I was used to riding on a butter smooth surface. So Barry and all these other guys, they pretty much just kicked my booty. You know, I didn't know Barry at the time. And I heard his name, you know, because he was one of those guys that was so far ahead of me. But, and that hadn't changed very much, but ended up moving down to the area, Barry, about 5 years ago now, right?
Right.
Yeah, about 5 years ago, moved down here. I was kind of paddling stand up on my own, and got connected with Barry. And then I think it wasn't long. Through the Wrightsville Beach Outrigger Canoe Club.
Yeah, we met through paddling 6-man outrigger canoe.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
And so not long after meeting Barry, I somehow ended up with an OC1. And I remember the first time, and here's one of the great things about Barry. I love paddling with Barry, but he's such a good teacher. He studies technique, but he's always so positive and so encouraging. I remember the first time I took the OC1, we went out the inlet there. We went out Masonboro Inlet at Wrightsville Beach, and I got out to the end of the rocks, and just immediately, poop, I hoolied right there at the end. You know, Barry's so encouraging the whole way. He still has it. So even though I was horrible, I was slow, I was hooling way too much. You know, I just had such a good time, and he was so encouraging, such a good teacher, that I was hooked. And then
I was just trying to get you to. I was trying to keep your spirits up, because I was being selfish. I saw these bumps on the other side of the rocks. I'm like, come on, man, you're doing great. Let's go over there.
That's true.
We ended up going around the jetty to surf on these bumps. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we paddled OC1, and then, you know, once we went downwinding, I was hooked. I mean, that was it. It was, you know, once you downwind, it's hard to, I still love flat water paddling, but once you downwind, anything else seems like running on the treadmill.
Oh, I know.
And then I don't know what prompted me to get a Surfski. I just kind of started looking around on Craigslist one day, and I guess, you know, I thought it would supplement my OC1 training, and I think, you know, I'd heard a couple of people talk about they had gotten a Surfski to kind of supplement their OC1 training, just kind of do some cross training, and I thought, well, that'd be cool. So I started looking on Craigslist, and eventually found a great deal on a used V10 Sport, and bought it. And I think we paddled it. Barry and I would switch off in the beginning. I would paddle it one time, and he would paddle it one time, and then I'd put it up, and I think we paddled like once a month. And then
Dude,
one day
like,
Barry's,
yeah, like after 20 minutes, I was exhausted. I mean, I was just like, dude, can we trade back? Because I was so
This is kicking
tired.
my butt.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found that like at first it was 30 minutes and then it was 45 minutes. And I was, like, I'm doing pretty good for 45 minutes on flat water or on calm ocean water. And then 45 minutes in, my core would just melt.
Mhm.
And then after that, I'm just flopping out all the time. But, one day we went out and let's see, Barry was in the OC1. His daughter Jenna was, and we were doing the run that we'll probably talk about today. His daughter Jenna was on the stand-up board, and I was in the V10 Sport. It was the first time I tried downwinding in the V10 Sport. And by the time I got back, we only did like a 5-mile run, I think, or 4 miles, Barry.
Right. Like maybe four or five
Yeah.
at the most.
By the time I hit shore, I had already composed my Craigslist ad to sell that stupid thing. Because it was just a struggle.
A beat down.
But I'm glad I didn't because now, like Barry was saying, I mean, the downwinding and the Surfski, that's where it's at.
I remember when you first got the Surfski, I didn't say anything, but I was a little puzzled. Like, I was like, I wonder why he got a Surfski, because we were having so much fun on the OC1s, and I was kind of like, I wonder what that's about,
I really don't know what the answer is.
I don't know, but then each time I tried it, I was a little more addicted to it, because I was like, every time I tried it, I was figuring out like, oh, that's how you use your legs, or man, if I don't go back too far with the paddle, my effort level went down and my speed went up. I mean, it's just like every single time we paddled it, I was kind of like, this is cool, and I started thinking about, all right, how can I get a Surfski? How can I get one that's not going to break the bank? Cause I, just bought an OC1 or, but it's like, now Rod asked me, he's like, hey man, what do you like better, OC1 or Surfski? And honest to God, it's whatever I paddled last. And the last 20 paddles has been paddling in that Vega. So that's my favorite right now. But it's I'm starting to get, I know we're starting to become Surfski paddlers because we're getting that extra thumb on the inside.
Oh yeah, right. Yep. You're
the
becoming
callus
official. Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. But
after a few years, that'll develop, and then it just is there. And I mean, I remember in the early years for me, always blistering. My hands were always blistering different ways, and now it's not really at all, because it just becomes permanent, I think, at some level. But it's a great story. I mean, what's it's interesting and fascinating is, both of your backgrounds, and Barry as a surfer and Rod the triathlon, and I was in that same boat. I was doing a lot of triathlon, and I just finished Ironman. It was just like, I want to get off the road bike and the running constantly, and wanted to get on the water. And I knew nothing about Surfski, and read an article and stumbled into it. Only bought it because the article I read said, this is not a traditional kayak. This is actually something fast. But and I was horrendous. I couldn't even put my feet in the boat with the Valhalla. But the interesting thing that I think that not even realizing at the time, but what that void that ultimately filled was, I had also been a big skydiver, and then I'd gotten married and we moved to an area where there wasn't a drop zone. I still had all my gear and stuff. And then finally, my wife was pregnant, and so twins on the way. And I was like, yeah, I'm probably not going to be jumping a lot out of planes. So I ended up selling my parachute, and I bought the first gen V10. That was my first modern surf ski. And that was 15 years ago. And it's been, upward ever since then. I just finished the Downwind today, and it's just, every time it's just still as good as or better than before.
The odds of dying in a surf ski are a lot lower than the odds of dying in a
I hope so. You just gotta.
I don't know unless you paddle with Barry, and then it might change a little bit.
Yeah, come on, let's go. It's not going to be that bad.
I used to have a hashtag on Instagram that was hashtag paddling with Barry, and it was documenting the time that I thought I might die paddling with Barry.
Oh my gosh, we try to find where the line is, and
yeah,
there's a video that Rod and I have on our channel about we both broke our surf skis on the exact same day. And we broke our surf skis within minutes of each other coming in Carolina Beach Inlet.
Oh,
and it was just, honestly, and I know Rod, you might argue with me, but honestly, it wasn't that big. It was just dumping. It was just like sucking up and just
dumping hard.
Yeah. So, definitely don't want to do that again.
Yeah, I mean, we'd been in and out of that inlet dozens, if not hundreds of times. I don't know how many times. I couldn't even begin to count how many times we had been in and out, and for both of us to break our skis. And
that's crazy. Yeah. How did they break? Did they just buckle or?
Yeah. Go ahead, Rod.
Yeah, I think, mine, I got distracted by some dolphins surfing on the wave behind me. I turned sideways and let the wave break, dump me down on top of the ski. I came down on top of it and broke it in half. And Barry's, plus I had just seen Barry's ski go flying. I don't know if we think maybe Barry's ski hit the bottom.
Yeah, I think it did. I had caught the wave. I'd caught the wave, and you know how when the wave is breaking behind you, you really need to keep paddling.
Yeah.
To kind of stay out in front of the white water a little bit. And that just was not even possible. I mean, I was trying to do that, but it was just sucking up, and it was so shallow. It just
pitch pulled it straight down.
And Rod's got some video. You can see the tail and the rudder, the tail of the surf ski shooting straight up. Like the ski had nosed into the sand, and then it shot straight up, and it opened like a clamshell, like right where the seam is. And actually, that was a blessing because it made for a little bit easier repair. I think, Rod, your canoe, it almost got broken half right behind the cockpit.
Yeah, the Surfski. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, your Surfski. And I think that was actually a more challenging repair.
Yeah, I mean, he did a great job. Chris did a great job repairing it. And I mean, you almost couldn't tell. So it was a little heavy after that, but put a lot more miles in it after that. But yeah, that was a cold day. I think the water was in the low 50s Fahrenheit. And I spent 45 minutes in the water. Barry spent a little more. But
wow.
Nick's thinking 50 degrees. That's warm.
That's pretty warm. We're at 45 right now, and I'm thinking,
oh my gosh. Yeah, we swam. I mean, you're holding a paddle in one hand and you're towing the boat with the other hand. You're doing the side stroke scissor, and then you're doing the breaststroke frog kick, and
you're not moving quick.
How much you really want to keep your surf ski,
right?
Yeah, there were
this thing behind.
Yeah, there were 2 or 3 times. I think Rod and I we talked about it after. The thought crossed our mind, am I going to have to just let this thing go?
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty full of water. It's like maybe 1 inch of air inside of it, and you're just kind of dragging it. And then I kept thinking, dude, you can get this fixed. Don't let it go.
Wow. Yeah. So on that note, why don't we zoom in? We got the map here. We're kind of hearing some of the stories. I'm curious to zoom in and see a little bit more of this awesome coastline, warm water.
So North Carolina, right? And then, so we're right on this point right here, down below Wilmington, and where we like to paddle. And there are a lot of downwind, pretty much this whole coastline here is a nice downwind run. Here's Wrightsville Beach right here. So if you were to do the graveyard, you would basically paddle, you would start about here and do this loop around Wrightsville Beach. But you can see through all of that a whole lot of that graveyard course, the Carolina Cup graveyard course, the majority of it is flat water.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Little
about
section here.
yeah.
So I
There's
think,
about 7 miles of flat water, and
yeah,
then got the inlets plus 4 miles in the ocean.
right.
Okay.
So where we like to downwind is down in this region down here, the Cape Fear region down here, and pretty much from Curie Beach up to Carolina Beach. That's kind of the run that we like to do, and that gives us, so it's about, if we start,
Yeah,
we normally start down at Fort Fisher, which is a real neat, if you visit the area, that's definitely a historic site that you want to visit. But we normally start down at the rocks at Fort Fisher, and this is all parking right here. So if you can find parking, during the crowded times of day, it might be tough to find some parking. Sometimes we have somebody drop us off. But the nice thing is, the wind is always coming from in the summer, and that's when it's really lined up nicely. Is that southwest wind?
Yeah.
And that parallels the shore perfectly.
Oh, nice.
So you lined up, you get the primary swell, south-southwest primary swell, and you get the south-southwest wind, and it really forms a really nice.
Perfect. It's a very straight coastline. I mean, angled, but straight. There's not a lot of
and the wind
variation.
just goes right, just parallels that shore really nicely. The thing that's really nice is when you get out to park, you can put your boats right here at these rocks, and that keeps them out of the wind. So that's where we kind of rig and get everything rigged, pull them right off the car, put them at the rocks here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a short walk down. The gazebo's not there anymore, but it's just a short walk down to the water, and it's go time.
On looks like a nice sandy launch.
It is. It's a nice sandy launch. The difficult thing here is that everything is a shore launch. We don't have any down on this run. You're getting in on a beach, and you're getting out on a beach, or either you're going in through Carolina Beach Inlet. We've already heard what can happen when you go through Carolina Beach Inlet.
Yeah.
So if the surf isn't good, you do have to pick your days. You're not going to go out on a day that it's really, really pounding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only protected inlet in our region is Masonboro Inlet at Riceville Beach, and that is a good 40-minute drive for me and Rod. So we pretty much have to make a decision. If the wind is good, we're like, man, do we punch out through the surf and go for it? Or, and it's interesting. Launching from the beach and landing on the beach is actually safer than going in through Carolina Beach Inlet.
Right.
And that's weird, but that's just, I guess that inlet is just so unpredictable, and the sands change so much. It's actually easier to launch and land on the beach, because you can get within 50 feet of the beach and get out and swim and pull your boat in swimming, or if there's not a lot of people on the beach swimming, that lowers your stress level because you don't want to hurt anybody.
You're right. It's tricky coming in. Definitely. I've been in that situation where you've got people in the water and you're trying to navigate waves, and that's interesting. Yeah. But so that inlet is interesting. So what I'm understanding, the sand just kind of will shift around, and it'll get so shallow then that the waves will just build and dump, and it just gets prettier.
Here's a great shot. This is the inlet.
Yeah,
and this is a pretty accurate representation of the inlet, and it's all shifting, but you can see there's a very narrow channel here, but you see that channel disappears, and this is about where we broke our boats, was on this outer bar out here.
And that's pretty far out.
Yeah,
honestly,
it is.
So that's where the waves start breaking, and this whole area here can just be a washing machine. I would not recommend that if you're not extremely comfortable in rough water. I wouldn't recommend the inlet except on the calm.
Hey Rod, show Nick Nick where me, you, Greg and Jeff where we launched at Fort Fisher, and then show him the landmarks as you go on this run, and then show him where we landed, where we finished.
Yeah. So we hopped in here at the rocks at Fort Fisher. This is called Battle Acre Park.
Okay.
And so if you Google Battle Acre Park, this is where you'll land. So that's where we dropped in here. And typically what we do is we'll just kind of angle out to sea for a couple of miles, a mile or two, or some amount of time. We'll just angle out and kind of do our warm up going up against the wind.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives us a little bit longer run with the wind.
Sure.
Hey,
So,
Rod,
you know,
can I jump in here?
Yeah.
So to add to your point about paddling out a mile or two, it gets you out away from Bald Head Island, blocking some of the wind.
Oh, right.
But go ahead, Rod.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once we get, I think probably a mile offshore is probably about ideal, Barry.
Yeah.
Get about a mile offshore. I mean, there's still plenty of good bumps inside, but they really start running well once you get about a mile offshore. So
Yeah. I think
angle
that's consistent. And I think at some level, right, waves will turn to shore. I don't know if it's like a half mile or something. So I think a classic, and it's better to be safe than sorry. I think a classic beginner mistake, and I did this for years just because I wasn't comfortable being further out, is you don't go out far enough and then the waves are constantly taking you in. You're
Right.
always kind of fighting, getting pushed in. And then you find, if you commit, and it's also not always fun to paddle upwind, but if you commit to getting out, you just get a much better run.
yeah.
If it's assuming it's safe.
Yeah. So if we put in here and then we paddle 2 miles upwind, that gives us on the short run, that gives us 9 miles of downwind paddling, which is
Nice.
nice.
Very nice.
And then we pretty much just parallel Curie Beach here. You parallel Curie
Mhm.
Beach, you go by the pier. Hopefully you're far enough out here that, the pier's not you're hardly going to see it, but it is a good landmark. And that's 3 miles from the launch point.
Okay.
And then we just keep working our way down the coastline. And there's a really easy, the next pier is Carolina Beach Fishing Pier, which is pretty much closed. You can kind of see why.
Oh,
It's kind of,
yeah, rough. Yeah,
it's kind of
yikes.
rough. Yeah, it's not quite as rough as that. That's Google Earth, but it's that's kind of one of the finishing points. If we're not going to go in through the inlet, then we'll just swing right on this side of Carolina Beach Pier and swing in the shore.
And that's probably pretty protected, right?
Just to the north. It's actually not.
It's not.
Very protected. And you do have to watch out for some broken pilings in the water at the end of Carolina Beach Pier. It's gotten progressively shorter through hurricane seasons through the years. So you have to kind of watch for those. There is one tall outer piling.
Mm-hmm.
If you go outside of that, you'll be fine.
Yeah. And just inside the tall one, there's at least 2 short ones that just barely break out of the surface of the water. They're just tall enough it would give you a really bad day and mess up your boat. So
if you want to be safe, you want to go outside the tall one.
Yeah, right. And so that's where, when we paddled with Greg and Jeff, that's where you can see those little stumps on the beach, those little pilings.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's where somewhere in there, either right before that or right after it, is where we would finish. And even if there's surf, that's a little more negotiable than going in through the inlet.
Yeah. Yeah. And the great thing is there's a town parking lot right here.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So you can park right there, and then it's just a little hike up here, unless you've got a super high tide like we did the last time Greg was here. We had a super high tide and we had to walk up to Freeman Park and walk our boats back down the road, but it's not a bad walk either. So
yeah. Greg's wife, Lori, picked us up one day and I was like, man, she is so cool.
Yes, she is. She supports him and puts up with him. She's awesome. Laura's
Yeah.
awesome.
One of the things that you want to, if you do decide to go close to shore, I'm not sure it's going to show up here on Google Earth. There's actually a Civil War wreck that pokes out of the water
No, yeah, I'm glad you
in
remembered that. The
in Carolina
Beauregard.
Beach. But you know, it's normally
Ah,
that would be you'd have to be pretty close in, like a quarter mile offshore. But it's an old blockade runner, and it actually pokes up out of the water at low tide.
Yeah,
ah,
I can't remember if it was me or you, Rod. It was a relatively flat day in the ocean, and we had our workout. We just said, hey, let's go to Carolina Beach Pier and then come back home. And one of our skegs, I remember, I think it
Yeah,
was
that was
me.
you.
I think it was me. My fin clipped the top of the metal
oh,
Hashtag paddling with Barry.
yeah,
oh,
from the Beauregard. So that was correct me if I'm wrong, Rod, that was a Confederate ship that was basically trying to run the blockade to bring supplies in to the Confederates, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And
wow.
it obviously didn't make it.
Yeah. Well, it was a pretty good, apparently it was a good blockade runner. I think it had made 16 successful trips before it finally
Jeez.
got
Yeah.
chased to ground.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's kind of cool that thing's been there since the 1860s.
Mm. Yeah, that is cool. So
If
let me ask, on a good day, then, are you going to come across other downwinders out there? Is there a number of people on the water, or is it just you guys? How many?
Yeah, it's just us. There's a great culture, a paddling culture in Wrightsville Beach with the Outrigger Canoe Club, and a lot of guys who OC1.
Mhm.
There's a handful of South African transplants who live in Wrightsville Beach who
Okay.
paddle surf ski. But as far as Carolina Beach, I mean, once in a while we can convince our buddies from Wrightsville to come join us. But to answer your question, man, no, it's just
Mm.
us and the sea turtles and the jellyfish, you know.
And how far is
Um,
Wrightsville? How far apart is Wrightsville from?
Wrightsville Beach is probably a 45-minute drive one
Oh,
way.
okay.
Probably just because, I mean, if you were a bird, you could get there in 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. But you
But
have to.
when you're driving the car, you got to go around all the waterways, and you got to go over bridges and zigzag around, and
Got
you
it.
know,
it's definitely worth paddling there for sure.
oh, it's beautiful.
Mhm.
But our favorite downwind run is that Fort Fisher to Carolina Beach run.
Right. That's
Okay.
because you get a lot of mileage of downwind doing that.
Barry, do you want to share the additional 2 mile option? You
You're
think
talking about
that's worth?
paddling upwind.
Yeah, or going in through the inlet.
Oh yeah. So if we're feeling mentally strong or we're feeling kind of froggy that day and we're going to go for it through the inlet, sometimes you can cut the inlet off on the left hand corner, stay real tight to the beach, and there's like a little deep channel right through there that
Uh-huh.
is just deep enough and wide enough for a longboat like a Surfski. And that actually is really fun to catch these runners, these bumps in the ocean on that corner, and you can
Mhm.
surf them. You can surf them all the way to that corner, and then we paddle in that way because I find that more manageable than going real wide.
You don't want to be out. You don't want to be out in the middle.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is just messy in the middle. But even way outside, right near that where that cut is, way outside where we broke our surf skis, that actually, I mean, there's something about that. The waves just like to
Get gnarly.
pitch. Yeah,
Mhm.
they like to pitch up and then dump.
Mhm.
So whereas in here, this far left corner, it's messy, but it doesn't pitch. It doesn't suck up and throw over and close out. So that's actually my favorite thing to do. It's challenging because you're tired at the end of the run, and
Mhm.
you're kind of you're doing a lot of bracing, and your technique is starting to fall apart. But you're like, hey, I'm faster if I don't fall out, and And so you hug that. And then once you make it around that corner, then you're either getting a ride with the tide coming in, or you're paddling against the tide coming out. But this is kind of, I like doing that because I feel like that's such good training, because you're tired. And it seems like when I'm tired, my technique gets better because I'm not relying on my muscles. It's forcing us to rely on our technique.
Sure. Yeah.
So, you're paddling back up in the flat water to, there's a great spot where we park our cars, and it's there's lots of grass to lay your boat, and it's actually one of my favorite places to paddle from, because I find I paddled there today, actually. Yeah, there you go, Rod. I paddled there for today. I launched there at that little sandy beach where Rod's got his cursor. And I paddled out the inlet and then paddled all the way to Carolina Beach Pier, turned around, and then came all the way back. So it's this giant horseshoe shape route. And that round trip was a little over 9 miles. And I like doing that because it forces me to paddle upwind, downwind, side wind, and I start and finish my paddle in flat water. So it's kind of like, okay, my warm up is technique, and my cool down is technique.
That's good.
So it's helping me get better, and it adds the element of the rough water. So
I just like coming in through the inlet because it gives us 1 more mile of downwind.
Yeah.
You'll take the gamble, and
but yeah, there is. If you did come in through the inlet, you would take this left and travel back south, and either you could take out at the Snows Cut boat ramp right here. You have somebody pick you up there, or you could pull out at this Florida Avenue, which is a little public beach that's right on the Intracoastal Waterway there.
Yeah.
This area here is pretty tricky too, that where Snows Cut meets up with the Intracoastal Waterway. There can be a lot of current going through there. And so that's something else to be aware of. If you did do that full run coming in through the inlet, at this point, you've gone at least 11 miles, and this can be a very high. We've seen sailboats get stuck under the fuel dock there. Due to the current and due to wind. So you do have to just be, I think probably, unless you're really comfortable with the area and really comfortable with your skill level, probably pulling out at Carolina Beach Pier is probably your best bet.
So what about boat traffic in that area? Is there much? You mentioned the sailboats, they're out there fishing. Is there, when you're doing the downwind run itself and you're out in the open ocean, do you come across, you have to be concerned about watching for boats? Or
most of the time they just think we're crazy. They're like, what are these guys doing? They're 2 miles offshore, because it's kind of cool because they're trolling about 4.5, 5 miles an hour. And you're certainly going faster than that when you're downwind. And so most of the time they think it's cool. Once in a while we'll come across a shrimp boat at the inlet. And I remember not too long ago, Rod and I are like doing the calculation in our head. We're like, okay, he's dragging a net and our course is going to intersect. It's like, what? We need to make a decision now. And I'm glad I've got on this orange PFD on my chest. Although there's been a few times where Rod and I were convinced that they thought from a distance, they thought that orange vest was the red can marking the channel.
Yeah.
Oh,
so there oh boy.
And you're like, hey, why is he coming towards me? And then within about 200 yards, they realize, oh, that's not the buoy. That's a dude paddling.
But for the most part, when the wind is blowing, if you're doing a downwind run, there's really no good way. If it's really cranking, the wind that we like to go out in,
Yeah.
there's no good way for the boats to get out on the ocean.
Okay.
And so typically when we're downwinding, we really don't see much boat traffic at all out here. And if we do, it'll be in the inlet or on the waterway itself. And it's really not a factor.
Got
Hey
it.
Rod, tell Nick about the what's the name of that huge sea turtle that we've seen 3 or 4 times? And we
Oh, the leatherback turtle?
Yeah, we think it might be the same turtle that we've seen 3 or 4 times.
Really?
Show him on the map, because we always see him about the same place.
Well, we've seen a few. I mean, yeah, we've definitely seen some different ones. I mean, usually we'll see them at the start of the run here, and that's about this time of year, about May to June is when they migrate through here. And if you haven't seen one, it's I mean, it looks like a small prehistoric Volkswagen.
Wow.
Yeah.
The head is absolutely huge. It's a huge turtle. I think the shell can get up to 6 to 8 feet.
Wow.
So
yeah, this guy
by your
Sure.
boat.
Those are so prehistoric.
I mean, he's got. You said it was a leatherback. Yeah, leatherback. His head was every bit as big as a 5-gallon bucket. Wouldn't you say, Rod?
Oh yeah.
And then it's got these 3 huge ridges on his back that look like a dinosaur. You know, and he's blackish, he's blackish gray color, but that's always amazing to see. And then we see a number of loggerhead turtles, and
We see a lot of loggerhead.
yeah,
A few green. We saw a very large green last year. So yeah, it's one of the fun things. Lots of stingrays and
dolphins,
eagle rays. Few sharks. You know what we found, Nick? I can't remember if I talked to you about this or not, but we found last summer the sharks were downwinding at the same time that we were.
Really?
And so you're riding down the wave, you know, and you look over and there's a fin going down the wave, and they're just surfing down the wave. So we don't know if they were feeding with the wind and feeding, but they sure enough.
Interesting. Wow.
yeah,
But
they're out there. It's but that's anyway, yeah, they're out there. I think, was it, Rod? Of course, I didn't have my GoPro with me, but I was paddling out Masonboro Inlet in my OC1, and I was trolling a Clark spoon, which is like a little metal flash with a hook on it, and with a hand line. So I had this line tied to my Yaku on the canoe. I caught a bull shark that was 3 feet. So I went home and I looked it up, and when they're born, they're 2 feet. But just the bull sharks, they're barrel chested. They're just round and barrel chested. And, you know, the things that go through your mind are just hilariously insane. When you know, the whole time I'm winding that line around this wooden block, I'm thinking, I am so stoked. I got a mackerel. I'm already thinking in my head how I'm going to clean it. I'm going to put it on the grill. I'm going to get olive oil. I'm going to get, you know, and then I get it within eyesight of the canoe, and I'm like, oh crap, I got a shark. And then my next thought is, how am I going to get the lure out of his mouth? I want my lure. And then I think, you idiot, you're not going to sacrifice your hand for a $4 lure, you know? So thankfully I had my knife. I cut the line, and then I was worried about the shark having a hook in his mouth, and my buddies are like, dude, that hook's gonna rust in 2 days. It'll fall out. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But yeah, I mean, they're out there, but they, you know, they just want fish. They don't want us. Yeah.
So let me ask a few questions on, so we know I looked up the water temp, and it gets nice and warm in the warm months. I think it gets into the 80s right through the summer. And a couple months in the 70s. I think your coldest is what, about mid 50s, low 50s?
Low 50s.
Low 50s, and probably January, February timeframe.
Right.
And what about the wind? So is it like, how, if you had to guess, you know, how consistently is it blowing, or what, is there a windy season? You know, for most. I think the winter is windier. How do you think about that, or how does that vary through the year?
Well, there are two windy seasons. During the winter, you've got northeast winds coming out of the northeast, and they parallel the shore, and they are fun, but not so fun. They're just not as good. The really good season is summer. And here we get these predominant southwest winds all summer long, and it's not unusual for us to get in 3 or 4 downwind runs a week.
Wow.
Because what happens is the wind is down in the morning, but as the day warms up and things get warm, we start getting those Gulf winds coming up, and it's not unusual to have at least 13, 15 mile an hour winds, sometimes climbing up to above 20 mile an hour winds. And that's a pretty regular occurrence during the summer.
Wow, that's nice. And then with that kind of coastline and fetch, what is that just ballpark at a 13 to 15 knots? Are you doing like a 2 to 4 foot, 3 to 5 foot wave?
I would say 2 to 4.
2 to 4 is nice.
It might be a little bit bigger sometimes, but
it really depends on how the primary swell and the secondary swell all line up with the wind. And so you might get 2 to 4 feet. You might get a day when it's 4 to 6, Barry, on the bigger days, maybe.
Right. And that's not 4 to 6 foot is special, but it's not quite as common. It's mostly 2 to 4 feet.
Yeah.
I actually, and Rod and I've talked about this, it's actually keeps it really interesting because there's usually two swell directions, a primary swell direction, and then there's a secondary swell direction. And that actually makes it fun because then both swells start to cross as you're surfing. And then as you start to visualize and see where those swells cross, and you're like, hey, I want to put my boat there where those two swells are crossing. And then you try to go from pitcher's mound to pitcher's mound. And then you're guessing and you're making these educated guesses. Where's that swell line going to intersect the other one? And can I put my nose there? And that is just so addicting and so fun. And so when it starts to get, Rod, we've also talked about when it gets like 25 and 30 miles an hour, I don't know why. I don't really know. I'd be curious if Nick, if you've experienced this, it doesn't seem to be as good as when it's 15 to, 18 miles per hour.
Yeah, I'd say like 15 to 21 miles an hour is kind of the sweet spot.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors that come into play, but I would say that is a sweet spot. I mean, I think when it really gets cranking, I only know where I've paddled and stuff, and I know it's different everywhere, but it also obviously has a lot to do with the fetch. And one of the things I've been paying a lot of attention to is, there's a sweet spot. Like today I went out and it was probably blowing a solid 19 to 20, and I started in a bay. And so it was straight off wind. So it was dead flat where I started. And within about 3 kilometers, I was getting nice runs. And from 3 to, there's a window where from like 3 to 9 or 3 to 10, 12, 10 kilometers, it's perfect because the wind is, what you want is that wind strong enough, but the wave's not too big. And that's the zone that, that's the stuff that, Boyan's videos and stuff. If you're going to get conditions that you can surf long runs, that's what you're looking for, is that right formula of wind strength to wave size. But I think as the waves get bigger, 6, 7, foot, then it's just kind of a different ball game, and you're not sitting on those waves. I mean, you're catching them, and when you catch them, you get these long rides, but you're not just kind of sitting. At least me, maybe other guys can, but you don't sit and carve them as much. So I've heard, even the best guys in the world, I think I heard Hank one time say that, the ideal Molokai is about a 20 knot, 4 to 6 foot wave. And that's going to be their fastest time, even for those guys. As it gets bigger beyond that, they're not faster anymore at a certain point. So
Yeah, I think we found when they get bigger, you get more exciting rides, but the whole run itself is not, the average speed is not as high.
not
And
as
we have
high.
some videos of our eyes, like
Yeah.
big saucer-sized eyeballs
Yeah. They're
as we go
moving
flying down the
fast.
face.
Yeah. And you got to have a ton of power and your timing's got to be impeccable or you just don't get them as much,
Yeah.
if, those, the smaller ones, if you're strong enough, you can always kind of catch up to it. You can always kind of power up to it. But if you're not carrying speed and they're big, they get to a point where you can't power onto them, unless you're Hank or uh, Sean or Oscar, one of the pros. But yeah, it's fascinating. Let me ask, do you guys ever do out and backs? Do you get those kind of conditions? Do you ever get I guess
Oh yeah,
east, straight
especially
east and
especially if we don't want to spend an hour driving. But
yeah.
yeah, there's plenty of times where we'll put in at Cary Beach and we'll paddle. We're like, hey, let's paddle 30, 45 minutes into the wind and then turn around and come home. Or
Yeah.
let's do 10 minutes out and then turn around and just keep repeating that over and over and over.
Yeah.
But we definitely do that quite a bit, especially if the winds aren't parallel to the shore. But that run that Rod was showing you and the one that we did with Greg so many times when he was here, it works. The ideal is south-southwest, but
Mhm.
it'll work on southwest. It'll work on straight south. It might not be as special as the south-southwest, but it's still fun. And
Work.
it depends on, you might have a south wind and then the swell might be a little bit out of the east.
Mm.
And on that day, you're figuring out, how do I surf the back of this bump and still go the direction I need to go? And
Mhm.
that, and that's
It's fun.
pretty fun.
It's fun. Yeah.
It's a different challenge.
Hmm.
Um,
But if you were to come to the area, there are plenty of town parking. There's plenty of beachfront parking.
Oh, that's great
Where,
because
where you
that's not
can,
always the case everywhere. So that's
yeah,
awesome.
you could drop in and do you could drop in, and most of them have a pretty easy carry over to the beach, and you could drop in and do it out and back very easily.
Mm. Yeah, I'm always, I always encourage, especially beginners, to really enjoy and the out and back and take advantage of it because it's just, I think, in my mind, so much safer in so many ways, so many levels. It's just committing to downwinds is a commitment, and especially if you're talking 8, 9, 10 miles, weather can change, conditions can change, and it looks like there at least there's an approachable coastline along most of that. As long as I think Greg did tell me, I think he must have got stuck at one point, kind of bobbing out in front of that inlet, and he said it was you could see land, but it wasn't an area you could really go into easily, and the waves were dumping and everything, and so that's a little bit hairy. But generally, obviously there's going to be a break, but it seems like it's all sandy, and worst case scenario you can get in on this one. But other
Yeah,
downwinds, it's not.
yeah. The only place that you may not be able to hit shore safely is in the first quarter mile.
Mm.
And that's where these rocks are. And after that, it's just nice, easy beach. Well, yeah, and there's these rocks here, but that's all in the first quarter mile.
Yeah.
Everything else is nice, smooth, sandy beach.
So let me ask, we always want to talk about safety. So God forbid something, the boat busts in half and you're 2 miles out offshore. U.S. Coast Guard station, are there boats in the harbors that would come out? What are your options there?
You've got the Coast Guard.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Coast Guard is what, about 11 miles away, Barry?
Yeah, right there.
Or
they're at Riceville Beach.
They're
Okay.
at Riceville Beach. They're right up at Masonboro Inlet, and so they're going to be 18 to 9 miles away, I guess, at any point.
Yeah, I know the fire department has a boat. The sheriff's department has a boat. But obviously wear a leash, have your PFD, go with a buddy.
Paddle with a buddy, because it's not like anything's ever going to happen to both of your boats at the same time. So you're going to be fine.
Right. No, they wouldn't both break or anything
No,
like that.
that'll never happen.
But it's not like some areas where there's a lot of downwind paddling going on. It's we're kind of an oddity down here, so it's not like there's somebody waiting to rescue you. If something were to go wrong, you'd be ready.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta plan on being self-sufficient. I think, Rod, you're really good about bringing your phone in a dry bag, and we're always consistently wearing our Maka PFD and our leash and going together. So those are key. It does get cold enough in the winter where if something happened, you'd have to really be watching out for hypothermia. It's obviously not as cold as other parts of the United States. But yeah, you do have to think about that. In fact, the island just on the other side of Carolina Beach Inlet is Masonboro Island, and it's a natural preserve, 7 miles long. And we've paddled that distance. We've gone all the way to Wrightsville Beach before, but we don't do it very often because if something happens and you got to hit the beach at Masonboro Island, it's not like you can't run up to somebody's house and call 911.
No.
So that's one of the reasons we don't do that run very often unless we've got like 4 or 5 guys going together.
Sure.
And we say, hey, I don't care how much you're kicking my butt, you have to stop at Carolina Beach Inlet and regroup with us before we keep going, and that takes discipline amongst your friends and
Yeah, right. So, because if you hit that beach, the only option of getting off of it is probably the Coast Guard helicopter, huh?
Yeah, or you call a friend who tell them to bring their boat.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that's a good overview of what you guys got. It looks awesome. I know Greg speaks highly of it. He's had a ton of fun there. Gotten in some big bumps. He said, I think he told me last fall he was out there with you guys and it got a really big day.
Yeah, it was really fun. We've had each time he comes, it's really good, and so he needs to keep coming.
Yeah, he's a bit of a downwind charm.
Yeah, and we'd love to paddle with you, Nick. I mean, it's so much fun to, that's the thing about downwinding is like, if 20 of your friends show up to downwind, you're stoked.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But if 20 of your friends show up at the local surf break, you're kind of like, oh man, come on, But downwinding, it's like
total
sweet.
Opposite, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we'd love to have you.
That's awesome.
Have you paddle with us.
So maybe we'll shift gears and we'll talk a little bit about post paddle, grabbing a beer, a burrito, hanging out a little bit. Let's check that out.
If you've seen the paddle channel at all, where we're going to go post paddle. Yes. We do a downwind session. There's a Flamin' Amy's Burrito Barn is hot, fast, cheap and easy.
I love it.
That's the motto. So we're all over that. So that's probably our favorite post paddle meal. The service is great. The food's great. The big jerk burrito is well worth the trip.
Awesome.
And, so that's where you can get pretty much anything you want there. You can grab a beer at Good Hops Brewing.
Okay.
But normally we're just concentrating on eating.
Yeah.
So we're going to Flamin' Amy's.
Awesome. And what about, before I forget, if getting a boat, if somebody was to travel there, let's say maybe from internationally or something and didn't have a boat, is there options to access?
The best I can say, probably, Barry, you can correct me on this, would be to contact us through the paddle channel and we can try to get you in touch with someone. we do have maybe some resources that we can reach out to, but there just aren't a lot
Aren't
of
a lot.
just aren't
It's
a lot
not,
here.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I think we would try to be hospitable. That's for sure. We would do our best, but it's
I
gonna
mean,
be.
Barry's going to let you borrow his new Vega anytime.
Yeah,
So
right.
just give me a
Just
call. I'll
take
set
it.
that up.
No, but
It's
it's
too
not
light,
like
man.
it's not like I mean, I've never been to the gorge, but I hear about people renting a boat for that event, and I'm like, man, there must be a big paddle community there if there's enough boats to rent. Not, so anyway, it's
Yeah.
unfortunately it's I guess it's good and bad. And one of the good things is that this area is in some ways it's just still kind of like Mayberry, North Carolina meets Southern California. It's still sort of
Hmm.
chilled, laid back. There's not a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot going on. But the downside of that is it's going to be hard to rent a boat, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Um,
Yeah,
but
Yeah.
there's no place, there's no business that offers longboat rental
Yeah.
in the area.
It's hard. I think it's hard everywhere. I mean, as a dealer, it's a hard thing to do. I will certainly always make them available for experienced paddlers, but it's not like something you're gonna, give
yeah.
somebody a 18-pound Vega if they don't know what those things will blow away. We're like a kite. I mean, they're just that's. But yeah, and in Hood River, there's actually not a lot of boats in Hood River, but what happens is that
Oh,
the whole West Coast, I mean, they're coming for that
oh,
event.
everybody brings them.
Whole West Coast is bringing
Oh,
trailers, and even Jeff Schnelly drives a trailer out. So a lot of dealers are just. It's kind of this whole
I see.
migration of all the surf skis that makes that work. But it is hard. It's hard to do in other places. But
Something that it was really fun paddling with Greg because, he's paddled all over the world now. And
yes.
one of the things that made me feel really good about and thankful for our home is that some of the runs that we had while he was here, he was like, man, that was as good as such and such. Or
Mm-hmm.
that was better than this place, or that was better than this. And I'm thinking, I'm going, what? I'm like, are you serious? He goes, I'm serious. He goes, that was so much better than, and he's naming these iconic places that I'm like, are you for real? And he was like, I am being honest. I mean, it was kind of cool to hear him say that, but made me thankful for where we live. And, he might have saved me a few $1,000s from going a few places that I,
Yeah.
but I thought it was really interesting to hear him compare it to all these cool places that I definitely would like to paddle. I'm joking a lot, but I really would love to paddle a lot of the places he's been. But to hear our run is as good as a lot of these places he's mentioning, I'm like, man, that's pretty cool to hear somebody like that say that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I know we're probably running on time here. Anything else that we didn't touch on? Let me scan my notes. I think anything else? I mean, it looks awesome. I think what you nailed, what I think is very appealing is that kind of the laid back, easy to get around, kind of low key. It's not, I haven't paddled in San Francisco. I know they have amazing paddling in the bay there, but that's a pretty intense cities and stuff. When you get into some of those areas, it's a little more challenging to navigate, I guess. But
if you are at Wrightsville Beach, the traffic can be insane during the summer.
okay,
A little bit better down here. Summer, it's a beach town.
Beach town,
and
sure.
so there is going to be traffic, but a little more laid back here than it is at Wrightsville Beach.
Good to know.
Yeah, but the spring and fall are just perfect weather-wise and not super crowded.
Good to know. All right, guys, anything else?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's you mentioned the paddle channel early on. We've mentioned it a couple times, and like I think Barry describes it as just a couple of goofballs who like to paddle and who like to talk about paddling, and that's really
Yeah.
all it is. It's,
Awesome. Keep doing it. Keep putting stuff out there and talking about it. And, we're all playing a part in trying to grow the community. And I think it's growing. And like we've just, I mean, it's just crazy that you have this place. It's a beautiful run and you're pretty much the only guys out there most of the time. I have right out my back door, same thing. I've never paddling 15 years. I've never come across another person on the water and, phenomenal downwind conditions, but I know that's stuff's all over the world. So, but it's exciting. We don't have to worry about fighting for lineups and we don't have to keep our spots secret and we
Right.
can tell the world about it, and the more the merrier. And it's awesome.
Yep. Nick, thank you so much. Keep up the good work, man.
You guys too.
Yeah,
Thanks a
we're
lot.
Absolutely enjoying your podcast, Nick. We appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
All right. Night.
Thank you.